Hi and welcome to School Shorts with me, Melissa Chan Green, journalist and mum of two. More and more I'm hearing from teachers and parents too that the biggest challenge they have is around behaviour of children in classrooms or at home. And former principal Jase Williams felt this too, but he has a really interesting perspective on how to address it, which focuses first on the behaviour of the adult. He does a lot of work in schools with teachers on this. So here we get some of his advice around how to help children with these challenges, and also why he thinks the common advice of getting down on a child's level and talking to them is not the real solution. Jase Williams, you will be familiar to a lot of schools, but for those who haven't worked with you before, can you just explain what it is you're doing on a kind of day-to-day basis in schools?
Yeah, kia ora, Mel. So I work as a relational neuroscience educator. So I go into schools that are feeling challenged by kids' behaviour for the most part, and then we spend time unpacking exactly what's going on. And it largely revolves around the adults understanding what they bring to the table, and that if the adults remain regulated when things get hectic and tough, then the kids will actually feed off that energy as well. So that's what I spend most of my time doing, and recently doing a lot more work with parents in whānau and sessions for people after hours, and that's been really heartening as well to see the uptake in that as well. So yeah, mainly just immersed in helping people understand why we do the things we do, especially the real dumb things we do.
Well, there are a few of those, aren't there? That's interesting though. So are you saying that when you're looking at addressing behavioural issues in the classroom, you're actually working with adults on their own behaviours?
Yeah, I'm not actually even interested in what the kids do.
Wow.
So my lens now is that the kids will do what kids do. And kids have done these things throughout time. Nothing's really changed. But it's how we either react or respond. And we can respond when, as the adults, we've dealt with our own story and we've understood our own triggers, and we've done the work and been doing the work on ourselves, the inner work. And we will always react if we haven't done those things, because children are really messengers, and they will show us all the unprocessed, unhealed, unsettled parts of us, and we often don't like it.
That is so true. Since having children, I've reflected on that a lot, and I kind of feel like, people say, oh, when you have kids, it really makes you look at yourself, and I thought that was just about, my parenting style, but I've realized your kids are kind of you in your most raw form, like without all the masking and all the things that you put on top to cope with the world. And so it is quite confronting when you see your children and you think, actually, that's how I was before I learnt.
You're looking in a mirror. They're looking in a mirror, right? We're seeing each other's reflection. It's the same reflection in lots of ways, because even as we both sit here today, we don't just sit here alone. We bring our ancestors with us. So things that have been unsettled, unprocessed for them live on in us, and we won't know what they are until we become triggered and dysregulated, and then it all comes up. And it's really, you can't address that in the moment. And it's still tough to deal with and settle, but kids are great, not just kids at school, but your own kids. They will show you all the parts you need to deal with.
I'm getting the sense that this has stemmed from a personal story or a personal experience for you. Is that right? Is that your why?
Absolutely. I think for most of my life, I walked around with a mask. I didn't know it. I reflect back now on conversations I had with my wife in the past, and she would say to me, why do you do that? And I said, I didn't do it. I lacked self-awareness, and that's really interesting, because in the work I do, if I had to put on a percentage of adult educators I work with and how many are self-aware, I would say around 20% would be self-aware. That means the majority, 4 out of every 5, aren't self-aware. And I think I walked around like that for so long. So for me, it helped me understand who I was, how I was with other people. And it's just made me a better person in so many ways. Just having a little bit of this relational neuroscience and sitting with people and hearing their stories, it's humbling, and it's really helped me develop into a much, much better person.
Did you, because you used to be a principal up until recently, did you take that into your own school as you were kind of learning about this stuff, and what impact do you think it has?
Yeah, definitely. So we embarked on a journey maybe 8 years ago where I became really interested in what was called social and emotional learning. And went down a few rabbit holes with that, and we just started trying things in school. It wasn't anything really strategic. It was quite reactive in lots of ways, but I guess in a positive way. And we implemented yoga and breath work because we were noticing that some of our kids were coming into school not ready to learn at 9 o'clock. Just because a bell ring doesn't mean kids are actually ready to learn, because it doesn't take into account the journey to school, perhaps the morning before the journey to school, what may have happened the night before. So we had to put something in place. So I thought yoga might be the answer, and that comes from a background in never having done yoga. I just knew it was calming. I'd heard it was calming, so we tried it, and it really worked. And then we created a sensory garden at our school. And again, that was something very new for me. It came from visiting some schools and just acknowledging empathy. It was a concept that I'd heard but didn't really understand, but I realised a lot of our kids weren't showing it because a lot of our adults weren't showing it. And part of the sensory garden was getting the kids to look after plants, tend to plants. So that became really, really big. So we got to the point as a school where this relational neuroscience we were implementing made such a difference that we were awarded the Prime Minister's Education Excellence Award for Wellbeing, and we're still the current reigning defending champions because there hasn't been another award since. But what it did was it added some credibility and allowed us to start sharing our story out wider. So it definitely made a difference, and in particular, it changed our connections, not just with our kids, but also community. And we had our community understanding terms like stress response, dysregulation, that children had to be in a great space to come to school in the morning rather than just give us children that were crying and say, it's your problem now, because that's what it was like before.
Well, also I'm hearing from teachers and also from parents actually that there is this perception that there are more behavioural challenges in class or kids are more emotionally dysregulated. Do you think that's the case, or are we noticing it more?
I think both. I think that we still underestimate the impact that COVID-19 had on people.
And not just children, right? Teachers.
Everybody.
Everybody's impacted by that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we shut down for a number of months in schools, and in some areas even longer. Children attend to school with masks. So we didn't get those visual cues from each other, from the adults. So there's those kind of impacts. Dr. Bruce Perry, is an American psychiatrist, talks about the fact that low socioeconomic communities are going to feel the repercussions of COVID for up to 7 generations. So it's not going away. And what we say is that communities are so resilient, they dealt with it so well. And to me, it's just like you've got a layer of hurt and another layer of hurt on top, another layer of hurt, another layer, and COVID-19 sits on that. But the real hurt sits underneath, right? And we don't get to that. So is it resilience or is it just survival?
Resilience is an interesting word, isn't it? Because we really look at resilience as something that is good to be and that should be rewarded. But what do we think resilience actually is? What does it mean to be resilient?
That's a great question. And what we think resilience is actually not what it is. So we've got to go back to the origins of the word. So resilience comes from the Latin word resiliere. And that phrase was coined around the 16th, 17th century. And it was actually used to describe a piece of timber or wood and how much stress, strain, weight a piece of wood could carry before it buckled or bent or inevitably snapped. So if you think about a human being, is that the level we want someone to be at its snapping stage before, so that's what resilience was. And then in the 19th century, resilience was used to talk about ecosystems and how plants and animals were able to cope with extreme temperatures and conditions, and whether they were resilient in them or not, or they thrived or didn't survive in them perhaps. And then in the 1970s, because this is the birth of resilience as we know it, it's such a new construct. In the 1970s, social sciences and psychology came across the word resilience, and we placed that concept, which was about wood holding and bearing pressure, into human beings, like what's your ability to rebound, recall, and bounce back. So to me, resilience is it's a new construct, obviously, from 1970s, but it's also a very fake construct, where we've developed this out of necessity because our great-great-grandparents didn't talk about it or need it. because they lived in villages and they lived in communities and small hunter-gatherer groups, with 20, 30, 40 people. So if someone was stressed or overwhelmed, say with baby, someone was already there to take baby off you and give you that time and space for you to regulate yourself. If you're a kid and you needed to learn a new skill, you had your brothers, sisters, uncles, cousins, everyone was around you to teach you. And if someone needed to be disciplined, and when I use the word discipline, let's go back to the root of the word, which is disciple. So, you learn a lesson or someone you should follow and be a role model for you, not punitive as we see the word now in most cases. So we had that all the time, 24/7, we had community connection around us. Now we don't have that as much, so now we have to create a community and connection. So I think it's a very much a fake construct. So when we praise for it though, I think what we're doing is we're saying to people, we love where you're at right now. Your ability to hold and bear all that weight under pressure is amazing. So the message we get is, okay, I'm finding this really hard, so I'm going to repress and suppress all my emotions and feelings. And what we do is it's like a beach ball, and we push it under the water and we hold it down. That's what we're doing with our emotions and feelings. And when we inevitably let go, it's all going to come up. So
you're saying that actually children who are showing that they are extremely frustrated with something, or they are just being outwardly very sad, that we shouldn't say that we don't value that actually that's something that we do value is expressing yourself and not saying that you're just burying it.
We want to feel those emotions, and that's part of it. We haven't felt them, we've just pushed them down. And then they're going to come up in our adulthood, and we don't have the skills or ability then because we haven't had those repetitions in our childhood to deal with it. We just had someone praise us for masking and pushing them aside. So we become very good at that.
Yeah. I did see something on, some kind of meme or something, I guess, where someone said, if kids are so resilient, then how come so many adults are having therapy? Because you kind of have this situation where we think, oh, kids just bounce back and they're actually fine, they cope with it. But are they? Because then as adults, they're actually dealing with a lot of stuff.
That meme is so on point. We used to think about kids, and when kids went through the most horrific adverse experiences in the early parts of their childhood, we say, but they're kids, they'll bounce back. All what happens is, again, they just repress and suppress. And there is a bounce back. And those feelings bounce back in our adulthood and our relationships with the people that we love the most. And sometimes that's in school. Like those emotions come out because we have that level of connection, love, that sense of belonging with the teacher. So we're able to just be ourselves and those emotions come out. So is that behaviour, or is that a child feeling safe and being allowed to show the whole spectrum of emotions and feelings? And I think it's that. But if, as the adult, we haven't dealt with our own story and have this relational neuroscience knowledge and ability to regulate ourselves under that stress, then you're going to end up with two children that are hurt, except one maybe, say, 37 years of age.
I think I've assumed perhaps that people know what regulation actually is, but we should probably talk about what is regulation and what is co-regulation, because that's, I guess, what we're talking about when we're saying, don't suppress, actually deal with the behaviour. But what would you say that means? Yeah,
to me it means the ability to sit with that full spectrum of emotions and know that eventually it's like a wave, it'll crash and then it will go back out to sea and it'll come back in and eventually it will, and the more work we do on ourselves, the more able we are able to be to actually deal with that. So to me, co-regulation is something we don't talk enough about. We talk about self-regulation a lot. Now, to be able to self-regulate, a child needs to have experienced multiple repetitions of co-regulation. With an adult that is safe, consistent, predictable, present, and we talk lots about presence. Presence is another word we throw around like resilience. And presence really is being physically there, but also mentally and emotionally. Because I can think about times where I've been home with my wife and we're both present in the lounge, but we're also on devices at the same time, self-medicating from our workday, perhaps. And then our teenage daughter's in the house too, and she's also present, but no one is mentally and emotionally present in those moments. So it just takes one of us, and it won't be our teenage daughter in that moment, to check ourselves and realize, hey, we're not even present.
Yeah.
And then let's put the phones down for a while. And even in my home, it's become rare to sit around the dinner table and eat dinner. So that's we celebrate that when we do.
Yeah.
And we need to make more time for that. But Yeah, co-regulation is just the ability to remain regulated and calm when someone else is in this storm of chaos and overwhelm. And eventually what we do is our nervous system becomes regulated and it gets passed on to the other person. So there's no secret formula with this. Like people think there is. It's just the ability. So if you were dysregulated right now, I would just sit here and just be calm, think about my breath, try and stay grounded, and eventually that will be passed on to you.
Yeah.
It's not about my words, and that's a real myth, to get down on the level of a child and talk these affirming comments to them. We can. It's not going to hurt anyone, except they can't physiologically hear us. It's impossible because under stress, the middle part of our earlobe starts clogging up. There's a muscle called the stapedius. So that it enlarges so that we have an inability to hear what someone's saying. What they're going to take from us getting down at their level and trying to communicate is perhaps our facial expressions, and they're a little bit problematic too, because we find it hard to read them when we're dysregulated. Neurodivergent kids and adults will struggle with knowing what their own face is expressing in that moment, maybe an inability to read other people's. Teenagers struggle with facial expressions. But there are muscles around our eyes, the soft muscles around our eyes we'll read into, and it's our energy. So if you're overwhelmed as a child and mum's down at your level and she's giving you these affirmations and calming words that you can't hear, but her energy is calming, that's what you'll pick up on.
Right. So you're saying co-regulation is about feeling
Absolutely.
the calmness rather than me saying, right, dear, I'm okay that you haven't eaten your peas, but because that's kind of potentially saying something else.
Yeah. But they might be... That's great for you, though, because it's regulating you that you've given these words because you're in an overwhelmed state too. So perhaps for you, it's calming for you. So it's great for you. You can still say them. Like I said, it's not damaging or harmful to your child saying them. It's just probably not doing anything.
Yeah, got ya. Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting one, isn't it, when you say that it's actually yourself that you have to look at because, I mean, I would be a total hypocrite if I said that I got this right, but, you know, it's dinner time and you've got kids that you've just made your big dinner for, the oven, the fan might still be going, so there's this kind of going on, everybody's talking, your kids are screaming, you've got your phone's ringing and stuff, and, you know, they're kicking off that they've got the wrong colour plate. Yeah. And then what you want to do is just go, just eat your dinner.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is if you model that actually this is okay, it's fine, I'm going to be calm, then they'll be calm about the plate.
Yeah, because otherwise if you're modelling frustration, but it's also okay to be frustrated. It's also okay to be angry. We've kind of demonized anger, but anger is really helpful in lots of settings because without anger, how do we set boundaries? So we need to know when someone's crossed the boundary. Hey, stop. I don't like how that feels. Exactly. So anger's okay in those settings. It's just not okay to take it out on somebody else. That's completely different, right?
Yeah.
But we are modeling by default everything we do. So if we are really frustrated, not coping with the stress, that will be the way our children will cope with similar situations later in life.
Talking about stressful situations for kids, the sense of failure, because I feel like this is one thing that really is hard for children and adults, actually, but dealing with success and failure. As a principal, did you have any specific strategies around how you kind of made kids feel successful or helped them deal with failure?
That's an interesting question because I think my mindset has changed over time since leaving principalship and seeing the reality in lots of other schools and educational settings. But I think really we've got to go back to that mirror and looking in the mirror and thinking, how are we coping with failure as an adult? Are our children seeing that? Are they picking up on that? Are they feeling that? And if they are, then we've already taught them how to deal with it, right? But also at the same time, it's when we praise, what are we praising? Because if we're praising the outcome, what we're doing is we're setting a bar. And if the child doesn't meet that bar, they've failed you. That's the feeling the child has. It's not the intention, I'm sure, of the adult, but it's how the child perceives it, and that's what's most important. So an example is if you're in a classroom, and I've done this hundreds of times probably, and most teachers do this in their career, but in a primary school classroom, Everyone's doing a writing task, writing stories, and you're walking around the classroom, connecting with kids, helping them with different adjectives, questioning, and you come across Susie's work. And Susie's work is the most amazing piece of writing you've ever read. Our eyes light up, and we have that feeling of this oxytocin release and dopamine for us, and we've passed it on to a child by default, right? So everyone's high in the classroom right now. And you give Susie the option, Susie, do you want to read this out to the class, or would you like me to? Then Susie goes, okay, I'll read it out to the class. So this is a mistake we make first. We stop the flow of learning. We stop. Everyone has to stop now. Even though we might be mid-sentence, mid-thought, we've wrecked that for everybody.
We're like, oh, here's Susie again with her work.
And that's exactly what happens for so many kids.
Yeah.
We put Susie on this pedestal, and maybe her work is amazing. And there'll be someone that argues we should be celebrating excellence and stuff, right? And I get that side too. But we can celebrate excellence with Susie and say, that's amazing, that word there. I like how you changed that. It doesn't have to be a public display in front of 30, 40 kids. But when Susie stands up to read that piece of writing, we've set the bar for the class. Johnny's over in the corner, and Johnny's like, oh, I might as well stop writing now. I just can't do it. And if you're a 6-year-old kid, and that's how you feel in that moment, all learning now becomes that little bit harder or a lot harder, right? Because of the bar we set. So when we praise, you praise the journey, you praise the process. Even then, it can be problematic as well, depending on how we do it. Because I was thinking if someone's doing a piece of artwork, doing a painting, and we talk about, we really love the colours you used. Let's say the colours were blue, green, and orange. Or maybe yellow's a dumb colour. I never use it again in my artist life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it can be problematic that way. But we should always praise the journey and the process, not the outcome, because then we set a bar, and then then the bar is about us.
Yeah.
It's not about the child's intrinsic motivation. It's become extrinsic.
Does this, when you talk about this in your workshops, does this get a bit of a divided response? Because I can see some teachers going, what's wrong with setting a bar? Isn't that what we want to do in learning and education?
Yeah, it's very polarising.
Yeah.
And again, the polarising comes from what's our experience at school. Were we Susie and we got to read our story? Because I was Susie, I got to read my stories and I felt really good about it. And I think back to say year 9 and 10 at school, and I was top in form in English.
Yeah.
But then I realised the snarky comments from some of my friends. You can argue whether they're friends if they're snarky comments, right? So what I knew was, if I look back in reflection, my year 11 year, I wasn't top in form, even though I was. Does that make sense? I made sure I wasn't top in form, so I didn't have to stand on a stage at prize giving and deal with the banter, the put-downs from my friends and peer group, so you dumb and dull yourself down. That's what that does to kids. Not all kids, but that's what it can do. So it does become very polarising. And then if you think about it, say prize giving, and we talk about the fact that a Ducks award is won by 1, perhaps 2 if you have a runner-up Ducks. Let's say you've got 1,000 students in your school, so you acknowledge 2 kids. Maybe there's 150 children in that year level, right? You acknowledge 2 kids out of it. You put them on that pedestal. So what are we saying about everyone else? That's the lens I have now. I didn't have that when I was a principal, but I certainly have that lens now.
What do you say to people who say, yeah, but this is the real, out in the real world, you're going to fail and you're going to be successful, and everybody is going to have different experiences, and you have to learn to deal with that. Yeah.
I think first of all, it's acknowledging equity, which can be a struggle in this country and current climate. But it really is. And I think we're already off to a head start because our kids generally in primary schools understand equity. They understand that in a classroom, Susie's the same names. Susie is reading maybe level 15, Johnny's reading level 3. We've convinced them that's okay. And the kids generally buy into that. So that's fantastic, that we're going to meet you where you're at. That's where you're at. And it's about your journey and your process, not about, a ladder system, right? So the kids get equity. If we get the adults all understanding that same concept in the school, then we understand equity and fairness, and then the struggle is in getting parents to understand that same concept. Because for a lot of us growing up, what was drummed into us from day dot was being fair is everyone getting the same thing. Okay, that's equality, but equity is like, where do we all start first? So we've got to actually make sure we're on an equitable path, which is very difficult. So it's getting everyone to understand that. But I think we're at a head start with our kids because they already get it.
Just finally, for parents who are, I guess, dealing with children who have emotional challenges, what would your advice be to them? And I'm going to have a guess here and see if I'm right. Is it that they need to look at their own regulation and how they behave in that situation?
That's a great guess. and I think also it's ideally, when we have a situation at home when our children come home from school and they have this massive emotional outburst and are full of tears and perhaps even rage in that moment, that's an indicator for that parent that we're on the right track, because they feel safe enough to do that and be themselves with us. In my experience as an educator and also as a principal, there were times where we saw that from children at school. Sometimes we're not sure what the antecedent is, what the thing was that happened just before the incident or event. And then we get really frustrated with that, and often we turn punitive. But that's a result of a child not feeling safe enough at home. Sadly, I've seen that happen on too many occasions. But as a parent at home, if your child is having that emotional outburst, it's actually a really, really good thing. So yes, we need to work on our own story. We have to understand why we feel the way we do when things become overwhelming, knowing that we are the mirror for our children. We are their model, that not just the words we say matter, but how we are. I'd argue that how we are matters more than the words, because we can mask with our words. We can all say, I'm having a great day. It's like when someone says to you, how are you doing? You say, I'm good. We're probably not.
Yeah.
We just try and cut off that conversation.
Yeah.
So we don't have to go into a big, long conversation about our emotions and feelings, which, again, is transmitted from generations past, that we don't talk about how we are. So, yeah, dealing with our own story and just allowing our children just to sit with their emotions and feelings, which is really hard because we're protective by nature, we're nurturing by nature, and we want to jump in and save our kids. And I'm not saying to leave them to cry it out, because that's a whole other conversation for another day. That's not the answer. But it's actually sitting with. And as we remain calm under stress and pressure, then we are passing those skills on to our children, who then will have the ability to self-regulate when things get tough. And again, there's no, it's the simplest thing we can do is just to be with someone. But it can be really hard if it's not what we experienced as a kid.
Yeah, some wonderful advice there and lots for parents to think about. Jase Williams, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If that topic was helpful for you and you'd like to hear more, please do like and subscribe. It sends me that feedback. School Shorts is all about supporting busy parents who want their children to thrive. Follow on social at SchoolShortsNZ for fun ideas, helpful resources, and exclusive giveaways.